This is Alex, and welcome to Barely Braided, where we're taking a deep dive into foster care, adoption, and all things parenting, even the sticky stuff. Welcome, everybody, and happy Tuesday, or I guess whatever day it is where you're listening to this podcast. It's episode 27, and once again, we have an incredibly interesting story to learn about together today, and we have had our fair share of technology hiccups today, so I'm hoping everything goes smooth sailing from here. I have never had technology hiccups when it comes to remote recording, so I have high hopes that we're on the best path, and we're going to get through this one together because this is one that I'm super excited about. We have the pleasure of hanging out with Simon. Simon was adopted as a young baby and felt that he had a pretty normal childhood, adapting well, living with a loving and an honest family about his adoption. And it wasn't until adulthood when some pretty scary fears and feelings of anger were brought to the surface after a seemingly inconsequential event, which led him to do some soul searching related to his career and his own happiness. He's now a parenting coach, helping to improve kids' confidence and self-esteem using what he's learned from his own experiences. Welcome to the podcast, Simon. I'm so glad that you're here.
I'm delighted to be with you, Alex. Yeah, delighted to be here with you and hoping to deliver some interesting stories and help your listeners to some insights, because this journey that we're all on through life is all about insight. So anything that we can do to help your listeners to insights to help their lives be better and easier, that's what gets me up in the morning. So
I agree. This is going to be very helpful. It's going to be very insightful. And once again, thank you so much for being so patient with the technical hiccups. I'm so sorry. And I'm so glad you stuck with me. You're a very patient person.
Sometimes.
Well, this time you definitely were, because I would have been a little irritated with me and all the problems I've caused. But this is going to be worth it.
It is. It is.
So my first question for you, for our listeners who are in the U.S. or may not be in the U.S., I know that is not a Southern accent I hear. Where are you living? Where do you live now?
Okay, so you've got New York over there in the US. I live near Old York, it was a Roman city, was Old York, and it's 200 miles north of London and 200 miles south of Edinburgh. So Edinburgh is the capital of Scotland. So yeah, so kind of in the middle, the north of England we call it, but middle-ish of the country.
Okay, so just because I do know not so much about that area, how big, population is the city where you live?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I live in a tiny village that is about 10 miles from York. I don't know. So we haven't even got a pub. That's how small our village is. We've got a church and we've got a post box, and we used to have a phone box. It's a tiny village. It's got maybe 60 houses, something like that. So it's very small.
Did you say you used to have a phone box?
We used to have a phone box.
What's a phone box?
Booth, like a phone booth. We have
really
in the UK. You have phone booths. We used to have these phone boxes. We still have them. They're like a little cubicle. So if you ever watched Doctor Who,
yes.
Who, yeah, that is an old-fashioned. The outside of the TARDIS is an old-fashioned phone box. It's a bit similar to that.
Okay. So I have seen them, of course, but the only one that I know currently in existence, at least in this area in Nashville, is actually a secret entryway to a bar. And in order to get in, you have to go in and dial the correct passcode.
Oh, very clever.
Yeah, I haven't ever been there. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure where it is or what the code is. And then the other thing that's very interesting about that is I feel like ours, at least those that may still exist, like public payphones, they don't have a box around them at all. They're just like a phone on a stand.
Yeah. I guess it's a little bit different. I was over in when we spoke last time. I was telling you that I was over in Nashville, not too far away from where you live, at the end of January, start of February earlier this year. I didn't see any phone boxes.
No. So when was the last one taken out near where you are? Do you know?
Oh, it's a long story. It's a long story. The phone was taken out. The box is still there, or has it been removed? I don't know. There's some rubbish going on. People are saying that they're part of our cultural heritage, and people are trying to store them, change them into places to have defibrillators or community libraries. It's all a little bit weird. It's all a little bit quirky, cultural quirkiness within us Brits. I don't know. We're kind of attached to these red phone boxes.
I mean, I can see the nostalgia in it. Yeah.
But everybody's on mobile, so nobody's using them.
Yes, that makes sense. So were you also born there?
Yeah, I was. I was actually born in a place called Wrexham, which is a city in North Wales. So that's approximately 2.5 hours drive away from here. So my birth mother was from Blackpool, which is it is a bit like Coney Island.
Okay.
So it's a resort town, with slot machines and pleasure, like small scale, like Disneyland rides, a lot smaller scale. So yeah, so she was from Blackpool. She went into confinement, so she was sent to like a mother and baby's home kind of place when before I was born. And then she went to the hospital in Wrexham, and that's where I was born in January 1967. So yeah, I'm coming up 54.
Okay, so when you say she was in confinement, is that due to not being able to have a place to live, or why would somebody enter that?
So my take on it would be to do with like a family shame thing. So she was, early 20s, I think. She was still living at home, and she would be sent away so the neighbours didn't know she was pregnant, that sort of thing. But I'm speculating on that. I've seen TV programmes, and that's the sort of thing that they did in those days. So we're talking about 1967, which I think was the summer of love, wasn't it?
I have no idea. Very well could be.
In the US. So yeah, confinement. So yeah, that's what I've been kind of led to believe. She was sent away to confinement, so that the neighbours didn't know that she was pregnant, and the shame of being an unmarried mother in those days was pretty bad.
Okay. Do you have any idea how your biological mother and your adoptive mother connected?
That's a really good question. I only found this out last week, actually.
Oh.
So I was adopted through an agency, and so when my birth mother took me to the agency when I was approximately 5 weeks old, I think, and she met my parents when I was, handed over, whatever you want to call it.
Okay, so from what I understand, when agency adoptions happen now, in current times, usually the biological mother will choose the adoptive family. Do you think she chose your parents, or was it more of the agency pushing, or do you know?
I would guess it would be the latter. It would be the agency.
Okay. So I have another question, but before asking it, I'd kind of like to know the most appropriate way to ask something like this. So my question was going to be, tell us about your childhood, tell us about your adoptive family, but is saying adoptive family the appropriate way to say it, or would it be more appropriate to just say, tell us about your family?
Yeah, my family, my mum and dad, yeah.
Yeah. So what was that like? I know in the intro I kind of mentioned it seemed like, and the impression I got from you was that you had, a normal, happy childhood. Your parents were very open with you. What do you remember about that time?
So, yeah, they were very open with me. And so I was told that I was adopted so young that I can't even remember being told. I have an inkling how I was told, because in my bookcase, in my bedroom as a kid, there was a book which was a children's storybook about a couple that adopt a couple that get married and then they buy a house and they get a dog and then they get a cat and then they adopt a child. So I'm pretty sure that my mum and dad took me through that storybook and said, and this is what happened to you too. This is how you came into our lives too, or whatever it was that they said. But I'm guessing that that's how it happened. So yeah, my mum and dad, I had a normal upbringing. My mum and dad also adopted a sister, a couple of years after I was born. She came from the same agency, but it was a different family. So she was born something. She's not biologically related to me, or whatever. And as kids, my sister would sometimes say things, do you ever wonder about, tracking your birth, your real mum and dad down or whatever. I can't remember the exact phrase, the name she gave them. And I said, no, mum and dad are our real mum and dad. And, that's how it is. So my mum and dad worked together. So when I was about 4, my dad set up a business on his own. And my mum worked with him. And the household was very business centered. So my dad was he was working very hard to make the business work. And my best friend at school, Eddie, he'd been to a fee-paying school, a private school here his dad had. And so he told me, I'm going to be taking this entrance exam to get into this school. So you had to pass an entrance exam, and if you passed, then you had to pay for and you wanted to go to the school, you had to pay for it. So I wanted to be with my mate Eddie, so I said to Mum and Dad, could I do this? Take this, and they said yes, and I passed. So they had to work even harder then because they had to pay for my education rather than going to a school, a school that's funded by the government. Our terminology is different to your terminology, so I'm trying to make it ultra simple. And then my parents always treated me and my sister the same. So if was going to the fee-paying school, then she had to have that option as well. So that meant, that the business had to support that too. So we had, I had a comfortable life growing up, happy childhood. I guess my mum and dad especially was very consumed by the business. So he would go to work normal time, but he wouldn't come home till late, and he'd be working over the weekends as well. He'd be, either at work at his office or in the dining room working on ideas for the business. So they worked very hard.
That is very interesting because I see a lot of parallels, I feel like, between my family now with our adopted son and our foster daughter and your family growing up. So, for example, Joel and I are considering starting our own business. We're very work-oriented. We both work very hard, and I can see us making some of those same decisions. And then along those same lines, through the training that we've taken, we've always been told it's very important to tell our children the truth. Talk to them about their adoption, talk to them about their biological families as much as they want to know or as much as age appropriate. So I'm wondering if you have any opinion on, is it ever appropriate for adoptive parents to hide the fact that their child has been adopted? Is that ever okay in any circumstance?
Well, that's quite an absolute question. I think that it can, if you hide stuff and it comes out, then it can be distressing.
Yes.
So I was told very young, and it was done softly and it was normalized. It was normalized as in, this is a story about a family and this is how, you came to live with us too. So it was done very sensitively and normalized. And I don't think anybody likes surprises. Yeah.
Not that kind of surprise.
Well, yeah. So, would I say in any circumstances? I don't know. I mean, I don't think anyone likes surprises. I don't like surprises. So I would advocate.
So
not surprising anybody.
If you were to adopt a child today, would you treat the situation the same way your parents did with you?
Yeah, I guess I would. Yeah.
See, that's so beneficial to know because, like I said, we go through these trainings and we get this advice, but unless I hear it from somebody who's been in the situation, that's the most importance. That's the opinion I'll place the most importance on is somebody who has been there. So I really appreciate having that perspective.
Yeah, it's a question never occurred to me. My focus is really on the emotional dynamic and the level of consciousness within the family. So, the kind of the logistical questions you're talking about here aren't things that are on my radar, but, people want the logistical questions answering, I guess.
Yeah. Like you said, we have the best interest, hopefully, of our children in mind. And I can only speak for myself, but all I really want is for my kids to feel loved and accepted and happy. I don't want them to feel different from others unless they want to feel different and unique from others. It's hard to kind of navigate those things, and especially when all people are different, all children are different, they all have different personalities. And so I guess for a lot of these logistical questions, maybe there isn't a right answer other than it depends on your child and his or her specific personality and how they adapt to information and how they learn new things and what they like and what they don't like.
Yeah. So here's the thing. The thing that's popped into my head as we talk about this is what do we want? We want security, don't we? We want to feel secure. And I remember, so I've been with my wife since 1993. Okay, so I started dating my wife in 1993.
Okay,
and we got married in 1997. But I remember driving somewhere and trying to rationalize. I asked the question, why do I love this woman? And it's a bit of a strange question. Why? Because a why is a head question, and love is it's in the heart. Love is in the heart, not in the head.
Mm-hmm.
But I was trying to rationalize it. Maybe I'm just as a bloke, as a man, we're looking for rationalizing things. And the thing that I came up with was she doesn't let me down. And what I meant by that is that she does what she says she's going to do. And I think that is, we want people in our life that we can rely on. And surprises, we don't want surprises from people. We don't want nasty surprises from people. We don't want, whether we're adopted or we're not adopted. Nobody likes nasty surprises. Everybody's looking for reliability from the people that they love in their life. They're looking for consistency and certainty from those people that we cherish. So a surprise like finding out that you were adopted and you didn't know is going to shock somebody. I think it would have shocked me.
Yes. And I love how your thoughts about your wife can also be easily translated into other familial relationships. So for example, one of my main goals with my kids, and it has been, but just to emphasize this, will be to provide them security, let them know that I have unconditional love for them, let them know that I will always have their back. I will always be there for them and provide them that deep security that every person is looking for, that every person needs.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what kids are looking for. So I was talking last week to a lady that used to foster kids, and she was saying about the chaos that these foster kids come from, and settling stuff down into routine and order settles them down. We settle down internally when we are becoming more settled down in terms of our environment. If we're in a chaotic environment, then our thoughts and feelings tend to be chaotic. Whereas what we're all looking for is safety and security. So, a lot of people at the moment with COVID and stuff, everything's being thrown up in the air and they're feeling scared.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we kind of talked about it. It sounds like your parents did things the right way. They did things with open and loving hearts and honesty. But you also told me a little bit about a period in your adulthood that caused some big emotions related to your adoption. Can you share that with us?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So yeah, as I said earlier on, I'm coming up 54. So 14 years ago, when I hit 40, my mum and dad came round one evening on the evening of my birthday to take me and my wife out for dinner, and they brought a box of my possessions from my childhood that had been in the house that I'd never cleared out. So I'd moved out of the house after I'd been to college. So when I was probably about 22. So these possessions had been in the house, 18 years without. And in this box was my teddy bear. And this was the teddy bear that I'd had for as long as I could remember. And my father told my wife that the teddy bear had actually been given to me by my birth mother. And my wife told me that information. And I thought, my first response to that was, That's curious. That's strange. It didn't really register at all with me. I thought it's a little bit interesting that they hadn't told me that, because they hadn't told me a lot. They'd told me only that they had they'd wanted to have kids. They couldn't have kids for some biological reasons, and that they'd fostered some kids, and then they'd adopted me. And they'd collected me from an adoption agency in Liverpool. And that was it. I didn't know anything else other than that. But I knew that was adopted. So this teddy bear thing, kind of like, it didn't have any impact on me at that time. But then a few weeks later, I was talking to somebody, and I started sharing the story about this teddy bear. And I got really, really angry. And I started swearing and saying that my birth mother hadn't loved me enough to keep me, and that this teddy bear was like a consolation prize, and lots of profanity, and I won't go into. And so this lady said, she's quite a heart-centered, conscious lady. She said, "Well, Simon, I'm a mum myself, and I'm sure it wasn't like that. As in, I'm sure that she wanted to keep you." So what had gone off it was like a volcano that had erupted of anger that came from, inside me. And then as soon as this lady said these words that questioned me, Sarah, this lady said these questions, the volcano stopped erupting, but it was still just kind of bubbling away, if you like. And around that time, after that time, I'm not quite sure which, I'd hit a big business target, which I thought that was going to make me happy, and it didn't. So somehow I got it into my head that I couldn't be happy because I was adopted. So my life had gone from mainly happy but obsessed by business. So I'd seen business as the thing that was making me unhappy, to being adopted to making me unhappy. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm wondering if those feelings, or maybe that source of anger, switched in your head because the fact that you were adopted is maybe something that you could never change. It was something that would always be with you. Whereas what you do in your career and your business could be ever evolving. It can be controlled by you. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, and maybe that's completely inaccurate, but that's the first thing that I thought of, is it's the one thing in your life that you have no control over and never will.
Yeah, you can't control the past. But so I started getting into personal development, and my life got immeasurably better as I realized that I was okay, that I was more than okay, that we're all born just fine. I believe we're born. You look into a baby's eyes, and we see pure perfection in that baby, and the baby's not born with a lot on their mind, And then as we go through life, we pick up conditioning. We go through things and we pick up ideas about ourselves, such as I picked up the idea that there was something wrong with me, or that I needed to be a success in business, to be a good person. And we pick up all sorts of strange beliefs that aren't true. And we start to believe those beliefs. And they make us feel that, that there's something not quite right about us, whether we're adopted or not. Yeah. So I started to learn this, not intellectually, but actually deep in my soul, like an embodied, something that I saw to be true, the perfection of all of us. So that kind of changed my life around, and then I decided I wanted to kind of take that message to others. But then I had another hiccup further down the line. So should I go into that?
Yeah. Are you comfortable sharing that?
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. So, my purpose now is to help everybody that I can possibly help through my story. So the reason I'm so delighted to be here is in case anything that I share helps anybody else. If I don't go into what I learned, then it's not going to help anybody. So I had a change of heart. I started to see the truth of who we are. In 2010, I had some great mentors in this area. And then at about 2015, I was having a little bit of a wobble in my... Yeah, I had a little bit of a wobble. And I picked... Somebody recommended a book by a lady called Nancy Verrier, and it's called The Primal Wound. So Nancy Verrier is an American MD, a medical doctor, what you call an MD. So we call these people GPs in the UK. So they're general practitioners. They're family doctors. They're not specialists in any areas. They're not in surgery. They look at they have individual patients. Different healthcare systems in the US to the UK. So we have a national health service which is funded by the government, which is what Obama was trying to bring in, wasn't he? So you've got many of the private healthcare. So anyway, that doesn't matter. So this was a lady who was she had a biological child, and she also adopted a daughter, and she saw some differences between the two of these girls, and she went about trying to look for research in this area. She couldn't find any, so she tried. She did herself, and she wrote this book called The Primal Wound. And this book says things like adopted kids, adoptees, kids and adults, want to control things. Adoptees don't like change. Adoptees don't like... we're talking about surprises earlier on. They don't like negative surprises, and they don't like being rejected. And I read this book and I thought, this explains everything. This explains the way I am. And then I realised after a couple of years that this book was painting me into a corner, and in that corner, I was primarily wounded, which I'm not like. Adoption had damaged me, and then I realised, well, that's really, really disempowering. That's really disempowering. If you think that you are wounded by adoption, then you've got nowhere to go. I read the book, the follow-up book, and it's about reconnecting with, and it's a dark picture. There's no light, no light that I could see, and then I realised that this was, in my opinion, wrong.
Wow, it's very interesting how drastically your mindset shifted from initially believing, wow, this book really has the answers and this explains what I've been feeling, to later, hey, maybe it's more of a self-fulfilling prophecy where I'm feeling this way because I'm told that's how I should feel or I could feel based on her research. That's so interesting that there was such a dramatic shift.
Yeah. And the scary thing is, Alex, I'm in some groups on Facebook for adoptees, and they are going through exactly the same process as I am. They talk about this book, and they say this book explains everything. and it's really scary. And it's something I don't want to happen. I'm here. I'm on this show, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want that to happen. I don't want parents to believe something that isn't true about their kids, their adopted kids. I don't want that, because I don't. That is wrong.
Do you find yourself like commenting on these posts about this book and maybe offering your opinion or discouraging them from letting it affect them in the way that it affected you initially?
I try to do it very gently, and I try to do it very gently because my life has gone from light to dark to light again. And some of these adoptees have only ever known dark.
Wow.
So if I come along and say, there is light, and stop rooting around in the dark, they will round on me. They are convinced that they are broken. And I'm not going to get into that discussion in a Facebook group.
So from what I understand, the light for you, at least the light in adulthood, has come from the personal development work that you've done. What does that look like, or what does that mean?
Well, what that means is, maybe I can explain this with a metaphor. Okay. Should I give it a go with a metaphor?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So, and this isn't my metaphor. It's from a mentor of mine. And this guy is not a mentor in the adoption space, right? Or even child space. His metaphor is the diamond. The fact that when we are born, we are a unblemished, flawless diamond. We're perfect in every sense of the word. And the light catches us. It's quite a poetic guy. So, the light catches our sides and bounces off us, and we sparkle because of who we are, because of our perfection, and because of we are pure love, pure perfection. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense.
So as we go through life, stuff happens to us, and we like being adopted, for example. Could be one of the things that happens to us. Or we get bullied at school, or we get told that we are rubbish by a teacher or another kid in the playground, and we start to pick up, ropey ideas that aren't the truth about who we are, and we start to have negative thoughts about ourselves, and this becomes a kind of like a layer of manure that obscures the diamond. However, that manure doesn't change the diamond. It only hides it. It only obscures it. So my mission in life is to help everybody see their inner brilliance of their diamond.
I love that. That is so wonderful. And I love metaphors anyways, but that one was so good. So as a parenting coach, how do you bring out the shine in the diamond of these children?
Well, this term parenting coach, I'm not sure, because me and my wife, for some reasons that I don't really feel it's appropriate to go into for that, but we don't have any kids. So I'm trying to figure out what to call myself, because I don't really feel like I'm a parenting coach. One of the things I was looking at this morning, whether I'd call myself like a mentor for adoptive families or something like that. But because how I work is as a coach is by helping people see their diamond for themselves, not intellectually, but in their bones, an embodied understanding and insight. So it's a coaching conversation, and I'm working with the parent, right? I'm working with the parent.
That was what I was going to ask next, if you're working with the parents or with the children directly, or both.
Okay, so now I am working solely with parents. Okay, so for the last 7 years, I've been working with kind of kids and parents. And I've been working with other, using different metaphors to help kids who are adoptive kids, just like going into schools, working with classes of 30 kids between the ages of like 8 and 11, and helping them understand where their feelings come from, helping them be happier, helping them be more confident, helping them be more resilient, and also going a little bit deeper into the diamond of who they truly are. So I've worked with about 1,600 kids so far, and what I do now is I work with parents and I train them in my metaphors and help them see this stuff for themselves, because they can't teach what they don't know. So I'll give you the example, right? So I spent a bit of time in Germany. My German is, if I was back in Germany for another couple of months, it'd be pretty fluent. But it's not good enough for me to teach a child German. So I wouldn't teach a child German, and I wouldn't teach an adult German. If this stuff, we have to know it to be able to teach it. We have to see something for ourselves before we can point it out to a child. So see that brilliance,
Yes.
So it's like a for me, it's a coaching experience. It's a coaching engagement. So first off, I work with the parents, and then I show them my processes and my metaphors for working, so that they can share this stuff with their kids.
So, and I'm so glad that you're sharing this with us. And I feel like there's so much we as foster or adoptive parents could learn from you. I'm wondering, so on the podcast, we have tens of thousands of listeners who most of which are either prospective foster or adoptive parents or have started to become foster or adoptive parents. Are there things that we should know, or what information would you share with that audience that could be beneficial for them and ultimately most beneficial for the happiness of their children?
Okay. So the first thing is that identity is the ultimate leverage here. Just a slight aside, Alex, right? This is as important for non-adoptive parents as it is for adoptive parents. Yeah?
Yes. Yes, I'm all ears.
This is essential, right? So kids do what their parents do. Mm-hmm. We look up to our parents, right? So one of the reasons that I was so consumed by business was because my dad was. Mm-hmm. I did what I followed in his footsteps. I followed literally. I went into the family business. I worked with him, and then I also followed in the family function, like to being very, very business centered. Right. I give you another. I give you perhaps a ridiculous example that really brings this home. Right.
Okay.
My granddad used to smoke and used to tell my dad not to smoke. My granddad caught, so this is in the 40s, this is in the 1940s, right? Mm-hmm. So my granddad caught my dad smoking when he was 10. And he put his son, who was 10, over his knee and gave him a good smack, right? Mm-hmm. So you think, well, different times, right? Whilst he was smacking my granddad had a cigarette in his mouth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we need to set an example for our kids, and by an example, we need to, in my view, we need to become more conscious individuals so that we become the best role model that we can possibly be for our kids. That's what this is about. So in terms of what I think is really important for the listeners, it's about becoming more conscious. It's becoming more, understanding more about, who we truly are, seeing our own individual brilliance, not in a big-headed way, because everybody is perfect. Everybody's born perfect. Everybody's that diamond, but that diamond just happens to be covered up with manure. But the manure doesn't change who we are. So for me, this is all about becoming more conscious, because, who we think we are determines what we think about ourselves, Whether we can, the extent to which we ignore the negative voice in our head that says that we're no good. And those thoughts obviously determine our feelings, and our feelings determine our actions. But we live in a world that's obsessed with actions and strategies. Actions and strategies. The world's websites are full of them. The newspapers are full of them. 10 ways to do this, 10 ways to do that. Well, it's not. The real juice, the real leverage, what drives what our kids do is how we behave as adults and as parents, and who we see ourselves are. That self-esteem thing, and is critical. That's where the leverage is at.
Yes, the do as I say, not as I do, seems to be becoming outdated. I think that's one I've heard quite often as a young child.
Yeah. We're becoming more conscious. The example of the smoking granddad is ridiculous, but we still do things. I still see things, and I do them myself. I get caught up in my own, the internal drama in my head all the time, and I become, you were talking about being patient, and at the top of that, I still get impatient. I still get impatient. I did it this afternoon. I'm thinking I want to get to the swimming pool. I want to get my lengths in, get back and do some more work, come on the call with Alex. The more conscious we become, the more deliberately we choose our actions through the day, the better role model we are, and the nicer we are as people, and the better we behave around our kids. And that's what the kids pick up on. They're going to do what we do, not what we say.
Yes. And I did notice the parallel to the same one that you found. Your parents and your father, they were very oriented around their business and working and having a strong work ethic that you also have. And so I'm thinking now, I've been working full time for as long as I can remember, and I'm always involved in like a part-time job as well, or a side gig or a side hustle. And I spend a lot of time in different business endeavors. And I'm just kind of now, which is pretty long after the fact, I'm just now connecting, as you're saying, both of my parents were that way. Small business has run on both sides of my family for generations, and my mom is the hardest working person I know. And so I'm very thankful to have been given, I guess, that value and able to spend a lot of my time and dedication with my job. And I always feel guilty about that too as a parent, because I'm thinking here, I should be spending less time working and concentrating on business. I should be spending more time with my kids. And I guess it's going to be up to me to find that balance, because my mom did it. And so I think I can too.
Yeah, for sure. And this is, we were talking earlier on about, you talked about this word parenting coach, and when we get into these areas that you're just talking about now, about your kind of work-life balance and stuff like that, that isn't, I don't see that as in my world, my space at all to get into that. Because it is a balance, and we find our balance. There are 10 ways to find the balance. You find the balance by finding the balance, like you learn to ride a bike by riding the bike.
Yes. I absolutely love that. Unfortunately, we are running a little bit short on time, but is there anything I forgot? Are there any additional messages, any information that you'd like to share with the audience?
I guess the last thing would be to be gentle on ourselves. Okay, so maybe people have heard me saying, this is about the stuff what I've been talking about here. And you're thinking, oh no, I don't. Oh, that's another thing for me to do, and I haven't. I can't do this. Just be gentle on yourself. It's so funny, isn't it? I heard this with one of my clients last week. She was talking about this, and I said, look, you tell your child, right, that good enough is good enough, and trying your best is trying your best. So that's enough. When you say that to your child, you mean that. What if that could be, you could say that to yourself as well? What if, we are all doing our best, the best that we possibly can in any moment, right? So when I get annoyed because the woman is driving slowly and I'm on the way to my swimming pool, right? I used to kind of beat myself up about that anger that I have, that impatience that I would have, And now I don't beat myself up as much. So that would be my advicey bit, would be to, cut yourself some slack. We're all doing the best that we possibly can. Your child, you, your boss, everybody's trying to do the best that they can all the time. So just be gentle on yourself.
That is such a difficult skill to master, especially when you're talking about yourself. I like to say, give yourself some grace, or, I'm hoping that I am able to give myself some grace. At least for me, I can only speak for myself, that is very difficult to forgive yourself and keep in mind that, we are all doing the very best that we can. But I would like to propose that as my New Year's resolution is just to cut myself some slack, not be so hard on myself, allow myself to have big feelings without feeling guilty about it. So I would encourage other parents, other non-parents, listeners to maybe join in with me and, make it a resolution for the next year. Just be easy on yourself. Give yourself some grace.
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know whether it's a skill or not.
No, I mean, can it be practice? Is it like a muscle that gets stronger with time?
Well, I would say that it comes to you through insight.
Yeah.
So this resilience thing, people treat resilience as if it's a something like a muscle that has to be developed by going to the gym, and that is the message that people selling resilience courses will sell you on. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
And it's not. It's an insight. It's for me. We're born resilient. We're born to bounce back. The baby learns to walk by falling over, and they don't take falling over. They don't take. I mean, have you seen this? They don't take falling over personally. They don't think there's anything wrong with them because they fall over. Yes. And they don't need to go on a Tony Robbins course, the 10 steps to having your first 10 steps. Do you know what I mean? They don't need a mission statement about getting to walk. But at no point do they give up either. Right. So I think that we're born resilient. We're born to bounce back, and we learn fragility. So for me, what changes, and I'm in danger of getting into a coaching session here, Alex, is that what changes is when we see something different. When we see something different, the world changes. And when we see our own resilience, when we see that we're born to bounce back, then we're less scared of falling over.
I love that. And I feel all of that right now with 2 toddlers. I'm definitely feeling what it looks like when they physically fall, and what their emotions look like as they get back up again and as they learn. I've got 2, one who recently learned to walk and another who's in the process of learning to walk right now. And it's very interesting comparing that to how adults attempt to master skills.
Do they get over themselves quicker?
Adults or the walking children?
Kids.
Right now, they get right back up again and run across the room.
Yeah.
There are bumps and bruises and lots of hitting our head on furniture, but no serious injuries, and they always get back up.
Yeah. So there's your answer then. We are born resilient, and we learn fragility. We think that. I'll give you an example from my world, right? So I talked to my dad about this stuff. Unfortunately, my dad died 3.5 years ago, but I remember a conversation with him about 6 years ago about worry. And he thought that worry was good because it kept him on his toes in business. I'm talking about it. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, well, yeah, it may have kept you on toes in business and made him good, but yeah. But didn't it get in the way of you enjoying your life sometimes, Dad? And a little tear came to his eye, and that I'd never seen that in my dad ever before. And I'm having kind of goosebumps and a shaky experience as I explain that to you. Because we can, that's what insight is all about. It's when we change, when we see ourselves, when we see the pointlessness of worrying, or we see the resilience that we always had. So people say, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And I believe that that's true, but not for the reason that most people think it's true. I believe it's true because it allows us to see how resilient we always were. We just haven't noticed it.
Wow. Yes, I absolutely love that. So I have a feeling that once this episode airs, there may be listeners who would like to learn more from you or maybe contact you or reach out. Would you be comfortable maybe sharing your email address or your social media or a way that listeners could reach out to you?
Certainly. By all means, that would be great. So my email address is simon@simonbenn, so BENN.co.uk. So it's I'm here in the UK. We don't, comms are American, co-UKs are British. So simon@simonbenn.co.uk, and my website is simonbenn.co.uk.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I will post your website and your email address in the show description. So that way, if anybody missed it or needs the proper spelling, it will be there. And before we wrap up, I would also like to give a big thank you to our podcast editor. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a 5-star review on the Purple Apple Podcast app. And of course, Simon, I must thank you so much for sharing with us today. I know it does take a lot of courage, to kind of dig down deep into those feelings. And I know our listeners, especially those adoptive parents or even non-adoptive parents, can really, really benefit from the insight that you provided today. So immense thank yous to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I decided out of the blue, like 10 years ago, to do this. I was having a conversation with my coach and I just said to her, I want your job. I want to help others. So I'm living my dream here. This doesn't take any courage from me whatsoever, Alex. I just love it. And I love showing people light, showing people light and hope. Because it's always there. Like the diamond, it's just hidden under a bit of manure.
Yeah. The ultimate goal is being happy, being satisfied, being fulfilled where you are in life. And your insight is so beneficial in that area.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Simon. Once again, I hope we can talk again soon. And to our listeners, I hope you have a wonderful week and we will see you next time.